Welcome to another exciting day 4. It's a two-parter this week. If you listened last week, Uncle Frank went through in-depth ice out to spawn lures based on, what'd you say, the 4 stages of spring, right, Frank?
Yeah, we'll call it the 4 stages of spring. Yeah, last week's show, everything was predicated on water temperature, all the way up to the spawn.
We also had a rousing discussion if anybody wears their hat like Bucky the Beaver does in Uncle Frank's Bucky's gas station shirt that Mark Jeffrey sent him, and I must say, what do you think? Does it?
It's close, dude. It looks good, and with your earphones on, it looks like your ears are sticking out.
It looks just like Bucky the Beaver.
You're on it.
From the profile side.
It's perfect.
I feel like I'm about to go do some skateboarding in the early 90s. All right, we're back to normal. Like I said, two-parter. So today, we're going to take those, or you, Uncle Frank, is going to take those baits that we talked about in day 4, number 61, transition them into day 4, number 62 in this two-parter, which is areas to throw those baits based on the 4 stages of the spring.
Exactly. Precisely. So what do you got? What's new, man?
Not much. I'm just getting your audio dialed in there.
Ooh, was I off?
No, you were on. I just key you up. I'm trying to make sure that the audio levels stay even. It's been probably my biggest struggle since taking over for Mark in January was equaling the audio levels. If I do get hate mail, I've come across like 3 people who just don't like me, but most of them are like, hey, I love it, but we just got to work on that leveling the audio. So that's what I've been trying to do.
They'll get over it.
I do want to mention, like I said, this show is not actually live. We're kind of piggybacking off of last week's show. I am currently, this will run on Thursday. So hopefully, as this runs, I have already a 15-pound bag on the James River right now. As this airs right now, Frank. But
I'm going to hope for an 18-pound bag. Let's get you a jump in this.
Well,
one.
No, I'll take by 9:30 a.m. I'll take 15. I'm not trying to get greedy here. I'm trying to be realistic, Frank.
There you go.
But hey, I do want to mention before we get into this show, tomorrow is the last day. Friday the 15th is the last day for a fundraiser that I'm doing along with Adam Bartuzek from Minnesota for the St. Jude, the Dick Hiley St. Jude Bass Classic, which takes place the first week of May up in Minnesota. They've done it for nearly a quarter century, Frank, and raised over right at $5 million for St. Jude Children's Hospital. So we designed a BTL t-shirt, a BTL and St. Jude Bass Fishing Saves Lives t-shirt. 100% of those profits go to St. Jude Children's Research, and then it helps us as a team. Basically, the more money we raise as a team, it helps our takeoff position. So The top 10 in takeoff position is based on the top 10 money earners. So there's an incentive in it for us, but then all that money goes to St. Jude. It's a heck of a deal. So I'll be up there the first week of May, but this is your last full day. You can actually do it Friday, the 15th. But the last full day, go to basszone.com, click on the St. Jude fundraiser tab with the t-shirts. You can also, if you click on that, you can also donate directly if you just want to donate cold hard cash. But get some t-shirt, get a couple t-shirts for that. All that goes to St. Jude, one time only, and then they'll mail the t-shirt out to you. So already a lot of people have stepped up. A lot of the people I think who bought BTL merch in the past, bought the Day 4 shirt in the past, have stepped up for $20 to get a St. Jude shirt for a good cause.
Perfect.
BTL branded. So
I'm getting mine right after the show.
Yeah, you got to pay $20 for it. I can't hook you up on these.
I'm down.
All right.
It's for a good cause, man. I'm totally down with that.
All right, so I'm excited for this one. We were kind of talking about what we were wanting to get into this spring a couple weeks ago when we were kind of planning out the shows in the future, and this is one that I don't think, like I said, it's not anything revolutionary that we're doing here, but it's like one of those deals where every year you got to go back and you got to get recertified, like it's CPR, right?
Exactly.
You need to go back and it just refreshes it, put some stuff in your mind. That way, when you're out on the water, the goal of this one is you got the right baits in the right areas to put more fish in the boat.
Correct. And, last week we talked about all the baits, bait choices predicated on depth range and so on. This week we're going to go through some map work. We're going to do some map work, kind of take it, kind of go from main lake up a creek, essentially.
Would you say, like, if you were to put this in terms of a vehicle, like, yes, last week we kind of we detailed the truck, we put the rims on it, we got the wheels, everything's good, and now we're gonna go work on the transmission, make sure the guts are good, so we had what we're getting. Now we're getting into the real guts of it. Because in all reality, if you think about it, Frank, it doesn't matter how good your baits are if you're throwing the right baits. If you're not throwing them in the right area around the fish, you're not catching jack.
Exactly, you're not. This is going to help you guys too in your pre-fishing. This is going to cut time out of your pre-fishing. Now, keep in mind the maps that we're showing you now, I chose randomly.
This is not all just a specific. These are not like honey holes on your little lakes that you're getting.
No. What I did was I went on Navionics. I started popping lakes up. I go, oh, that looks cool. I'll just do that one.
Okay. Stuff with good examples. Now, what type of lakes are these? Because you had a few asterisks last week as far as some grass stuff, some natural lakes, and Florida lakes. That those are just some outliers. And I feel like most of the people who fish that understand those are outliers. But this covers the majority of the country.
Correct. This covers. We're going to call this reservoirs. Anything that's man-made, that has a dam on it, and it's man-made. We're not necessarily gonna predicate this on grass. It's just gonna be a regular reservoir. Mm-hmm. The reason being is grass lakes have a tendency to fish a tiny bit different. You know what? I'm just gonna say that. Well, here's what I mean by that. Everybody knows, okay, you go down to Florida, you go fish some of these natural grass lakes, even up north, in Michigan and in New York and stuff like that. When you're talking about a natural grass lake, you know that you're going to find spawning flats, spawning areas where there's just hundreds of bass spawning. Mm-hmm. That's not typical of reservoirs.
You have a lot of fish spawning a lot of different places over a period of time.
Absolutely. Reservoirs, you have little tiny pods of spawning fish. Could be anywhere from, 3 to 10. Most of the time when you guys went up to St. Lawrence and the smallies were spawning on all those flats, there were hundreds of fish spawning up there. Hundreds of them. The guys were using those in that one tournament up there. They were using the floggers, and they could see them all down there. You know what I mean? That's more predicated on natural lakes. Reservoirs don't behave that way. Now, there might be a section in a reservoir that is similar to that, but no, I have not seen hundreds and hundreds of bass spawning in one place on a whole lot of reservoirs. Now, it does happen on some of your grass reservoirs, but for the most part, we're talking about just reservoirs, and we're going to say without grass. And this will help you guys eliminate water really quick, early spring through the spawn.
Fair point. You on the Tito's this morning?
Yeah, so if I start slurring later on in the show, you'll know why. I'm not having a stroke or a seizure. I am.
All right, so
2 Tito's in. No.
So I have 5 marked up maps here that you're gonna walk our listeners and viewers through. We've done some of these shows before. A couple weeks ago, you did the walkthrough of the shop. The lab where you get things done. You talked a lot about how to tie different things to different types of hair. I thought it translated well to the iTunes, but also added a completely different element visually. This is one of those that you could probably listen to on iTunes. go back, find those maps after you've listened to it, and then you
Right.
can visualize it on the BTL YouTube
Right.
channel.
And so what we're going to do today, I'm not going to be doing a lot of this. Although I could do this, but we're not going to do
Yes.
too much of that, where I hold the map up and show you the map and then I point with my fingers. I actually sent these maps to Matt.
Because that map that you just held up, we now have in full screen glory right there, and then I can also zoom in, zoom out, circle the areas that you're talking about. So, are we ready to roll with map number 1?
Yeah. Okay. Let's do this. Okay. So we're sitting at home. We're getting ready to go out. And so basically, what I did was I picked a creek. Now I looked at the creek before I picked it, and I saw a lot of structural elements in it, which is good. Okay, because that means there's a lot of places for bass to move, stage, and spend the winter. So I picked that creek. Then I divided the creek into 3 parts. The first part is the section towards the main lake. The second part is the middle of the creek. And obviously, the third part is the end of the creek.
Okay.
Basically, what I did that for, and you could do this for any size creek that you want. But basically, what I did was I picked a creek that I thought was very manageable, one that I could fish relatively quickly, okay, had enough of everything in it. So if I narrow a pattern down in this particular creek arm, if I find creek arms that are similar, I know exactly where to go in that creek to continue to catch fish. And I could run that pattern throughout the lake as long as I'm on the same section of the lake. Okay. So here's what I mean by that. I will take the lake and also divide that up into 3 sections. I will divide a section up from the dam to a third of the lake, the third of the lake up the creek, and then the back of the creek. So the main lake will be divided, and so will my creek arms. So now what I can do, okay, and here's something else too. We got to remember this. In the blueback herring show, I talked about 3 types of bass. We talked about creek residents that live up the creeks. They never leave the creeks, and they're always up the creeks. We talked about migratory bass, the ones that chase pelagics, follow the shad, and pretty much they're nomads. They roam around all the time, okay? And then we talked about lake residents, bass that live on the main lake that don't go up the creeks. So we have 3 different types of populations of fish that we're concentrating on. Most of the time in the early spring, your overlap is going to be between migratory and creek residents, because your main lake fish are going to stay on the main lake, spawn on the main lake, live on the main lake. The only time you're going to cross those fish are in the cold winter months, winter to early spring, when they're out on those creek mouths and stuff feeding on, shad. The flash mob junior comes into play, blah, blah, blah. That's where you're going to have the overlapping of main lake residents and migratories. And then the migratories are going to overlap the creek residents when they migrate up the creeks to spawn. Okay. So we're only going to have a couple of overlapping places here. I didn't draw all the boxes to show all the overlaps because I figured I would just talk you through the creek, and then you'll understand it when we're all done. Right. So on this particular map here, let's go to, I believe in the first show we did water temperatures in the upper 30s to low 40s.
Ice out to low 40s.
Right. So what we're going to do is, and I'm going to explain something because we're going to use this map a couple of times right now for this. If you go, Matt, if you zoom into the red line to the main lake part, so I got part of that main lake in there. Now slide the map down so I could see the main lake. Money. Okay. So if you're looking at this section of the lake, and actually you're perfect because there's a structural element just below the red line that I want to address. So this is perfect. So we're going to look at this lake, and we understand that the fish, they're going to winter. They're going to want steeper areas. They're going to want deep water next to shallow water. And so this is a really good starting point at ice out or early spring with the Flash Mob Junior suspending jerk baits, swim jigs and swim baits and jig heads, that kind of stuff. Okay, so if you're going to look at a high percentage spot, if I'm going to look at a high percentage spot here, the first thing I'm going to look at is see where the submerged bridge is in the
Yep.
creek mouth. That gut that runs into that mini little pocket right there. Right there. You have a gut, you have a shallow flat on one side and a secondary point on the other side. That's an insanely good spot to look at that early springtime. It's a funnel, basically.
And on the map, it looks sticks out like a sore thumb. But if you're
Correct.
fishing that, you're kind of casting out into nowhere.
Right. So it's important to do your map work first, and then when you get there, you let your locators tell you everything. Because what you see on the map is a very good, accurate guesstimate.
Mm-hmm.
When you actually get there, you might find that that gut is shallower or deeper or not as wide or not as defined or incredibly defined. You won't actually know that until you apply your electronics to it. Okay, but understand this, we're looking for funnel spots. We're looking for places that a bass can easily suspend to feed or unsuspend itself to get back in a comfort zone. These fish are just now, they're starting to move. So what you have is you have your migratory lake fish coming into this creek mouth. It's important to establish where they're at. Are they still on the main lake, or are they working their way in the creek mouth? That's number one. That's the very first thing you do when the water temperatures are still insanely cold. Now, this is a reservoir. Okay. So I have to keep saying that because grass lakes are different. So we established a funnel point. So there's another funnel point. If you go to the same side of the lake that little gut was on and go to the red line, you're going to see another gut right in front of the red line. Right there, right where your arrow is. That's another gut. Now, what's unique about that? Well, it's not unique. It's a gut. So here's what we're looking at. If you go to that gut, you can follow that flat all the way up to the first gut we looked at. So that whole area there, exactly, that whole area there is a really good migratory route. Okay, they have good winter holding, they have good feeding flat right there. So you can see this is kind of what we're looking at. If you go straight across that little gut you're at now to the little creek arm, that little, yeah, right there, okay, right there, where that creek arm starts to, where the deep water starts to funnel in that creek arm, is a good A-rig spot. It's a very good flash mob spot. Now, you see in that little pocket there that deep water goes all the way into the first bend. So you could flash mob that entire thing, depending how big and obtrusive it is. And you'll find certain little nuances there that lend itself to that. So the bank that we looked at originally with the two pockets where your arrow is, that whole bank from pocket to pocket, from little gut to little gut. So let's look at that for a minute. That spot there can be flash mob, suspending jerk bait, crankbait. That spot there lends itself to a lot of bait choices because of how it's laid out. So if I was going to run into that lake, that would be the first area that I hit right there. Because to me, it's the first really good spot going into that creek. It has plenty of water, dollars to a donut. The fish winter in there. They don't even bother with the main lake. There's plenty of water depth, plenty of structural elements. So taking that into consideration, we're still in that 39 to 41, 45 degree range. If we slide down in between the two red lines, right there, now we got some really cool stuff going on. Right where the big 20 is by the red line, Matt, right there. You see that flat, how that flat comes out? It makes a tabletop right where your arrow was right there. That right there. There's a tabletop right there, a big giant flat area. You can see on the map, it's telling you that flat area is probably 16 feet deep. That is money. You have two shelves there. You have one that looks like it's in 16 and one that looks like it might be in 28 to 25. Okay. That is an absolute 100%. I would run there before I stop the boat anywhere, because that spot there is going to have flash mob fish on it. It's going to have your wintering fish on it. They're going to use that tabletop to feed, and they're going to use that as a holding area or a place to spend the winter.
You're talking about this thing that I'm circling right now is the tabletop.
Yeah,
in between the two, and just this is rudimentary stuff, but what we're seeing is this dark stuff that is showing a steep drop. That
correct.
Is contour lines that are close together that are showing that there is a steep drop there, meaning this in the middle does not have any contour lines, and this is what you're calling a tabletop in the
correct.
middle between two steep lines in the middle of a creek.
Right. Now, the beauty part about that spot is there's two tabletops. There's a shallow tabletop in 16 feet, and then your deeper, and then your deeper tabletop is in about 20, 25. So you have two of these things. This is a beautiful, beautiful structural element. In my world, the bells go off when I see places like that. Now, if you go farther up the creek from there, straight to the little point, the first point on the opposite bank you're on, shelf bank, the bank with the shelves on it. Right there.
Okay.
That's another fantastic place, because that point also has a big tabletop on it. It's got a big flat spot on it.
Right there.
Now, the beauty part about that spot is that point comes way out. That particular tabletop is shallower. It's probably 10 feet deep. Okay, judging by the massive amount of contour lines, it's probably a 10-foot high, 10-foot flat. That's another good spot to look at, because now what you're going to do is you're going to start to establish a depth range. Based on those two areas alone, we're establishing a depth range. The way that point sticks out into the mouth of that little gut is a holding area. This place also can lend itself to the cold water period, and it'll be a great staging point as the water starts to warm. So that's a good mid-lake section. Now, we got a lot of other stuff happening in that mid-lake. If you look at it, you have secondary points. You've got boat docks. You've got all kinds of stuff going on over there. Okay? And right before the other red line, you have another flat with another good tabletop on it. Right there. Exactly. Okay, so now you've got major structural elements in this lake. You have also bank cover in the form of boat docks, like where Matt's showing you. Where Matt's arrow is, if you go down just a tiny, right there, right where the arrow is, right there, the pinch point, you see where all the contour lines go to back to those boat docks. Right there, right there. You have all those contour lines funneling into one boat dock. All that deep water edge goes right to that one boat dock in the middle of that pinch point. You could probably fish that boat dock any time of the year and catch bass off of it, because of how the structure is around that boat dock. Right there. That's like a money spot. That's like a guaranteed fish. Okay. as we get farther back up in the creek, and the reason I'm kind of going through this creek really quickly is because I'm just giving you an idea how to
It's
break
got
it down.
everything.
It's got everything. So we're breaking it down. As you go beyond that red line, now we're
Now
getting
we're in the back third of the creek.
we're in the back third of the creek. Okay, so now you have resident fish that live there forever. They live in that creek. They never leave that creek. Those resident fish will spawn back there. Okay, and your migratory fish are going back there to spawn. But that is not the only place in that creek that you're going to have spawning. But that is more likely going to be the first place you have spawning, in the back of that creek where it doglegs right before the flat. Right there. That whole section of the creek, including that flat, provided it's not muck and mud, is going to be one of the first places in that creek that spawners are going to go to.
I mean, I'm going to look in these little
Exactly.
in these little notches that it's going to provide. If there's flow, it's not going to get completely blown out. It's going to be more
Correct.
protected from the wind. It's going to warm faster. It's going to
Correct.
Yeah.
That's 100% right. And that is the north facing bank, which means it's going to be protected from the cold north winds, which is where they're going to go first. And so that's kind of the breakdown. That is a creek arm breakdown. And so before we ever left the house, before we ever went anywhere, we've already established a starting point. What creek are we going to look at and why? And so that's what we chose. Okay.
And you basically covered all the different
times
of the pre-spawn too.
Right. I just kind of went through there in my head and said, here's what I'm going to look at. Here's why. Here's high percentage areas, blah, blah, blah. So what we're going to do now is if we go to...
One second. Are we done with this slide for now?
Yeah, unless you don't want it to be.
No, I just want to point out something here because I'm a huge boat dock guy.
Correct.
Especially on lakes that have a ton of boat docks, but there's a couple boat docks in here that just scream to me. Like,
yeah, and I have them circled out on another map. But we could do it if you want.
Nope, we're going to the other map.
It'll be easier because I blew the other map up so the boat docks were cleaner looking.
Perfect.
So map 2 will have some of that on them. Bingo.
Is this the same? This is the same creek arm.
It's the exact same creek, just a little cleaner version of it, so we could see a little more detail on it. So now, we're getting into the crossover period where I told you in last Thursday's show where we're going to have overlap in water temperature and overlap in techniques. So this is the overlap now. Now we're talking jerk baits, crankbaits, flash mob juniors, et cetera, et cetera. Now we're getting some overlap here. Okay. So if you go to the lead-in point on the right side, right there where your arrow is. Okay. The green circle is the structural element circled. Okay.
Which is a flat.
Which is a
tapering point.
It's a tapering point.
But also has some flat. It's a meandering tapering point.
Right. It's a very long, gradual sloping point. Okay, the reason I chose that is because that point dumps right into the main river channel right on the main lake. Okay, not only that, it splits another pocket. So you're going to that's a very good movement area for bass. It's a very high percentage spot. Now, we check that because the fish could be on those main body points. So we check that. My yellow line that's there indicates crankbaits, flash mobs, suspending jerk baits. That's a really good flash mob and suspending jerk bait point because of the flat taper. Those fish could be suspending on that thing way out, so they don't have to run to the bank immediately. As the water progressively warms now, you're going to see 2 boat docks right on the end of that point. Of course, I drew the green line over
I got
one.
you. We got you right there.
Okay. Those are massive high percentage boat docks because they're on a lead-in point. Okay. So any fish that's coming to that creek or leaving that creek, that's a stopping place for them. Very high percentage. The inside swing of that point, where it goes from 12 to 23 feet, okay, that's another really good roadmap in to the creek. And because it's a turn, we'll have a tendency to stall fish for a little while and hold them there because it's a turn. So if we zoom out a tiny bit to the other point on the other side, lead-in point, yeah, right there. Okay.
This is the very first gut that we talked about in the opening of the show.
Very first gut. So a couple things stick out to me. Okay. We have the flat where the yellow line is. We have a secondary point where the circle is by the submerged bridge. We have a flat with a standalone dock. That standalone dock, you could probably catch a fish off of that dock anytime you go to that lake. It's just in a spot, and it's the only dock on that point, on that flat, that will hold a bass. That is such a high percentage dock, it's sickening right there.
Because it's isolated, because it's on the flat, because it's adjacent to several key structural elements, and because it is also in the overlapping water of where you'll have multiple types of fish that will use it.
That is 100% correct. So if we slide down a smidge, okay, we talked about that flat that goes from the one gut to the other gut. Well, there it is, much cleaner. That boat dock on the gut of that pocket, that little gut pocket, that boat dock is another massively high percentage boat dock. It's right on a turning point of a contour line that'll funnel fish up to that 2 to 6 foot spawning area. That boat dock right there is a money dock. And those bass will migrate down that deep water edge right to that spot. It's just, this is, now you got to realize these are overlapping areas, okay? Water temperature, we're still throwing a hodgepodge of baits. We still got migratory fish coming in. So let's say we go to this thing and we start catching them on these places, okay? Now we have to determine, and you can see I got some other stuff circled there. It's all similar for similar reasons. I have the one circled around that lone boat dock on a point. That's a money spot right there, because look, the contours make a swing over there. So that dock circled and the dock right below it that's not circled, those two docks right there, I would hit in a second because all the contour lines funnel right into them.
What you're doing here for those, it's like, I think it's Todd Faircloth who told me this about Toledo Bend. He said he never fishes on Toledo Bend because there's timber there. He says he fishes Toledo Bend, and if there happens to be timber where he wants to fish, that's what he fishes. You have to treat the docks as the same thing, because if you look at this place, there's literally 75 to 100 docks in this creek. There's way more than that. If you get down here, you could spend your whole day in those docks. But what you're saying, Frank, is
isolation.
The dock, it's not because there's a dock there that the fish are there. They're using the dock there because they're going past that, they're staging there, they're living there anyway, and the dock just happens to be there.
Right. They're what I'm paying attention to, if you notice by now, is all structural contour elements.
What you're doing is you're making it really easy for a guy who goes out on the weekend and goes into a pocket and goes, holy cow, it all looks the same, and there's docks over this entire thing. It's the Lake of the Ozarks overload.
Exactly.
And then you literally get to the point where you can look at your map, you can pull in a creek, you can look at your buddy and say there's going to be a fish there, there, and there, and you just eliminated 90% of the water when you're dialed in on it right.
Absolutely, which is what I'm talking about right now. So if we start banging fish out in the mouth of this creek, okay, what I usually do, if I catch them good in that top section of the creek, okay, I start fishing my way into the middle section. All right. The reason being is I want to see how far back these most of the fish are really. I'm not talking about, fishing 3/4 of it for 2 bites. I'm talking about catching fish. So if I pull up to the high percentage docks and catch a fish off of each one, if I pull up on a structural element and catch fish off of each one of those circled structural elements, I know there's a lot of fish in that section of the creek. If I gravitate towards the center section and my bite starts to wane, okay, I try to remember where I'm at when I stopped getting bit regularly.
Mm-hmm.
And then I apply that to
To the
the
rest of the
other
lake.
creeks. And
Yeah.
I run the other creeks and I'm only fishing the first third or maybe the first third and a little bit more. I don't even waste my time running to the back of them. Yes, can you find something magical in the back of one isolated creek that, holy crap, there's a million? Yes, you can, but you're needle in a haystacking it. Okay. And you'd have to fish so many far away back ends of creeks, you'll run out of daytime to find the ones that actually are producing like one that you found. Where this way, that you're every time you pull into the top third, you're in a high percentage spot and you're playing the high percentages. That's all we're doing. We're doing nothing more than playing the high percentages. So if we go to wherever the heck we are, to the second, to
This is the second one.
to three, you're going to see a closer version of the center section of that creek. And it's going to be cool because this stuff's going to start sticking out like sore thumbs. You'll see it in a heartbeat now. Perfect. So you see all my green stuff is circled. Then I have some yellow squiggly lines. Once again, the first yellow circle is those 2 tabletops that we discussed. You have to look at that. You have to look at that. That spot right there is a staging spot, a holding spot. It'll reload both in and out when the fish come in, when the fish go out. Now, here's something really cool about that spot. That spot will behave exactly the same way in the fall. When the migratory fish are following all the bait fish to the back of that creek, aka be it gizzard shad, threadfin, or bluebacks, that spot right there is a major, major stopping point. So I have some boat docks circled. Again, they're high percentage boat docks. Now, when you look at that, most of the high percentage boat docks are actually on structural elements that we have seen in the map prior or on this map itself. Now, I have the cluster of boat docks on the middle point circled. It's not necessarily those boat docks that I'm interested in on this point. It's the point itself because those are floating docks, okay? So as the water warms, the bass will suspend under those floating docks because those black barrels that are underneath them will hold heat.
Swim jig, spinner bait, even a jerk bait.
That's swim jig mugambo right there, skipping under those black pontoons.
What word was that?
Mugambo.
I've never heard of that.
I made it up. No, did not make it up. It sounds good. So that's the only reason all those docks are circled. It's not for the docks. It's for
But if you are going to fish those docks, are you going to get parallel to it as much as you can and make long casts down it to where you're bringing that swim jig around it instead of spending an hour pitching it in every one? And then if you're seeing some feedback, if you're getting bit, if you're seeing some bluegill up under there, then you can go back and slow down, and then you can also figure out, hey, maybe they're on the back quarters of them, maybe they're on the front corners suspended over the deep water. So instead of spending 3 hours fishing every single slip and not getting bit, you start here, you get in the back, you hit the couple on the rail, you go down the side, you hit the corners, and in 10 minutes you can see if you've got any feedback.
Exactly. And we're talking about cold weather periods, but don't hesitate to fling a drop shot around that stuff either.
Yeah,
especially
especially
if
especially in the back
yeah.
corners there, you could see there's probably some brush piles. You've
Oh
probably got
yeah,
some guys in here with crappie boats. I'm looking for floating minnow buckets in any of these slips. I'm looking for
exactly.
chairs. I'm
And
looking for
the
fillet tables.
best key is lights.
Yep,
If you
that's
see
an East Coast thing more
yeah,
so than.
if you see lights on a dock, you know there's brush piles by it.
Yep.
Nobody messes around when they're crappie fish, dude. They catch them. They want them there, and they use the lights at night, and that's a money
But
thing.
if you don't have forward-facing sonar, I'm looking for strings that are tied up underneath the floating docks that go into the water
Exactly.
that have a little moss on them. That means there's a suspending upside down Christmas tree in there or some brush at some point.
100%. You have to use your eyes. We're using the maps to get us there. Before we even get on the lake, we're using these maps to get us there. When you get there, you have to use your eyeballs because you'll see a lot when you get there. And so that's really the main deal. And realize as the water warms, you're probably going to start gravitating towards the middle section of these creeks and towards the ends of these creeks. In the beginning, you're probably going to be in the first third. As the water progressively warms, you're going to make your way to this middle section. And as the water gets even warmer, you're going to be in the backs. And now remember this. Let's just go to that back section. The next map 4. Let's just go to it. We might as well. And I'm hoping you can see the purple dots I put down. I don't know if you can or not.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Okay, so we're in the back of this thing. So you have to realize something. In the way back where the 2-foot flat is, the last elbow in the entire creek, that's going to warm up first. It's also going to be the most volatile because if you can see, there's a stream that feeds that. So any rainfall that happens could muddy that back section up first. Okay, so you want to pay attention to the weather in those instances. So basically, I thought, oh no, you know what? Okay, that's a different map. Okay, so if we're back here, all those areas that are circled are areas you're going to find spawners. Okay, they're sneaky little spots off the beaten trail that your fish, and like I said, you're not going to find 100 of them. You might go on the inside of the one pocket that's circled and find 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the trick. They spawn on the inside corners of these little points right there. On the inside corners, they spawn. Okay. And you're going to see them there. And that'll happen, believe it or not, that happens throughout the entire lake. That also happens on the main lake. Everything that we're applying to this creek happens on the main lake only later. The main lake is usually the last to go off because it's bigger, takes longer to warm up, it takes longer for things to get moving. So if you were a bed fishing guy, okay, you could literally plan a month around the spawn and sight fish the whole time, based on where you're looking in this lake. So the main lake, if we were talking about the main lake, we would go all the way up the river system and we would find stuff just like what you're looking at right here. Only it would be main lake. Okay? And the same stuff would apply. You see, every pink line I got is on an inside turn. Every pink line I have here is to find a spawner.
Sneaky.
Or 2. Okay, well, I'm not even talking about structure fishing it now.
Oh, you're still gonna okay. Are you still gonna? You're not just gonna go, oh, inside turn and then idle there. You're gonna just kick it on high bypass. You're gonna just spend a lot more time looking in these areas, knowing these are high percentage areas.
Right. I'm gonna eliminate water so fast it's gonna make your head spin, because I know exactly what I'm looking for. So I know there's gonna be easy picking fish where those pink lines are. That doesn't mean they won't spawn in between them. That doesn't mean you won't find some spawning on a boat dock somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Those are just high percentage, super high percentage places to look.
Yep.
Okay. If I go back there, let's say we go back there and it's still cold. We're not quite near the spawn yet. We're not quite, they're not going to be fanning beds right now. There's enough structural elements back there to hold fish and stage fish. The first elbow where the two pink arrows are, it's a phenomenal holding area.
Right there.
Yes, there's a little flat just
Yep.
beyond that. If you go beyond that where the 2 and the 3 are, that's another flat with a little tabletop.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Dude, rattle baits. We talked about rattle
Mm-hmm.
baits. That's a rattle bait money spot right there.
Because it's like 5 foot deep.
Right, exactly.
Isn't this a little mini gut right here?
It's a mini gut. It's a little mini pocket, that thing right there. And so you have a lot of things going on, but you can see something here. We're not wasting time right now. So where you were just drawing your arrow, that's a jerkbait haven spot in the cold water period. I'm using a lot of verbiage.
I know it's very, very impressive, Frank.
Oh my gosh. So that's a jerkbait haven spot. It's a vertical
smorgasbord of opportunities.
That's right.
A plethora of options.
We have a plethora of options back here. But you can see that they don't have to go far. They can just suspend vertically. And here's a news flash. There's plenty of water there to hold the residents of that creek in
it's
the
deep.
winter
It's
time.
20 feet all the way to except the very back of it.
Right. That is a resident fish wintering area right there.
I mean, the only thing that you don't have circled in here that I would look at is these docks right here. Because there's still a little depth, and it's the
100%.
last dock in the creek. So you're going to have fish that are going to hold there before they go back and spawn. You're going to also have fish that spawn on it, and that's just a typical pattern.
Correct.
That one of the easiest patterns that you could ever get on
is the last dock in the creek.
When you go into these creeks, you either hit the first docks in the creek or the last docks in the creek.
Exactly. But here, this was just to show spawning location.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
I didn't do the dock thing in back here.
But yeah, all these little turns.
Yeah, it's
all of the little turns.
Those are just money spots. I mean, we're talking super high percentage. We're talking eliminating water. And here we just, in a matter of minutes, we just dissected a fairly decent sized creek and cut it down so when you practice in that creek, it won't take you a half a day to practice it.
This spot right here is the most susceptible spot in the whole creek to getting blown out, though, is it not?
100%. 100%. That's a spot there where you got to watch weather. Now, it could help you. Okay, let's say it's getting ready. The water temperatures are getting right. We're not in that super cold water period. We're in the mid to upper 50s. Bass are getting ready to spawn. That back there gets a little off color.
Crank it.
You're
Speed End Junior.
Oh, dude, you're Speed End Junior in it. You're Fat Boy in it. You're spinner baiting it, and you're covering water.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
we're talking for iTunes. We're talking. This is just the last little kind of noticeable contour before it goes back to the 1.5 foot creek. Now in the Ozarks, that's typically gonna have a little mud or clay mixed in. It's most likely gonna have some rubble that I called rubble. If you're on like an Ozark lake, it might have a little bit of table rock stuff that kind of goes to gravel back there, and it might be clear. There's all sorts of stuff that this bank could be depending on the part of the country you're in.
Exactly. So now you're talking rattle baits, you're talking bladed jigs, you're talking Speed End Juniors, Fat Boys, baits that you can fish and move and groove. So you can literally cover that back section in a matter of no time. I mean, that's a fast fish right there. And then if you start pounding them back there, well, now it's time to go and look for similar creeks with the similar flats in the back that the deep channel ditches out before the flat. Like I wouldn't just run to backs of creeks with steep guts in them. I would be looking for creeks with a little flat in the back of them. That's how you narrow down that pattern. Because there'll be creeks that have a million little fingers and arms in them, but they might be deep, super deep guts. And that's not going to be the same as that one. That one is much flatter. It's got deep water that ends before it gets flat. It's like a little funnel that ends right where the flat is. So if I catch them back there, then I'm looking at creeks with that similar type of layout to them. And that's how you establish a pattern where well, you know how sometimes in the spring you're on lakes, and it happens in the fall too, late in the fall, where you see guys, they just run out of a creek, they run part of the way down the lake, they blow in another creek, they go all the way in the back, and then all of a sudden, a little while later, they're out running down the lake again, up another creek. Those guys have established some type of structural element or some specific thing they're looking for in the back of the creeks that are holding fish and biting the way they want them to bite. So the guy will come out and he'll say, "Hi, how did you catch your tournament?" And he'll go, "Well, I ran the back of all the creeks and pockets." But he didn't really run the back of all the creeks and pockets. He was focusing on a certain type of element, and he recognized the creeks with that element in them. And that's how you eliminate water and on these lakes. That's how you run patterns. It's great. It's absolutely great. So if you remember the back of this creek, we're going to go to the last map. And this is going to be what I call a pocket. It's a short pocket.
So this is the first four were all in the same creek. You use the same creek as a
creek
example for everything.
Right. I use the same creek as an example, so you could break the main lake down exactly the same way. So now this is a small main lake pocket. So if you noticed in the back of that creek, the big creek, the first creek we looked at, you look at all these little pocket here. All of them are super narrow, super steep, and deep. So if I was catching fish in the back of the pockets, like on that big creek, if I caught fish way back there, the only two places I would look at are the bottom two pockets on this map.
These two right here?
Yes.
Or these two?
No, the bottom two.
Okay.
Right there. I would run all the way in the back of them and fish where they flatten out. Yes. Now, the dots, we'll work this one backwards. The dots are where I would look for spawners in this gut, in this pocket. All the dots are high percentage spawning areas where I know that if I pull up in there, I'm going to find some on a bed if they're bedding. You see they're on every inside turn of every little nook and cranny. It's very predictable. It's a very, very predictable pattern. Now, you're not going to find 100 of them, but you're going to have enough to catch, and you're going to have enough to catch them all day long doing that. So where I have the yellow lines on here, those are our structural elements where we're going to, if we're in a cold water scenario, like the water temperatures in the 30s, mid 40s, those places are suspending rogues, flash mob juniors, the swim bait with a jig head on them. Those are those places. Looking at this map, because we're in a pocket now, so everything is small and condensed.
This is the big main lake right out here.
Correct. That's the big main lake. So it's small and condensed, okay? So if we have a little more warm water, say we're in the mid to upper 40s to mid 50s, I can fish inside of all those yellow spots with Speed End Junior, Fat Boy, rattle baits, bladed jigs. I can fish all that stuff with those things. So there's a lot going on in this little main lake pocket. So I just basically what I wanted to do with these maps is just break it down as fast as you can, do a little bit of homework. And here, the irony of this was I saw this pocket. This pocket is right above that creek we were just in.
Interesting.
So I could literally nail these two places out in a half a day easily. So if I start catching them really good in these short pockets, I would fish short pockets. If I was having trouble in the big creek, I would run short pockets all day or the next day.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this then. You have the yellow lines. These are the flats. You're talking about kind of more reaction baits, feeding baits. Then you have your spawning areas back here. Are the same
Correct.
fish that you're catching out here in the on the flats, on the points, and that
They're
are they
going
this?
to the
They're the
dots.
same fish that are the dots.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
100%. Absolutely. And there's some key docks in here too. There's definitely key docks in here that you could fish, but we know for a fact right now we're going to pick some isolated docks. Like there's one on that point right above your arrow. That's an isolated dock, and then the one that in the pocket before where your arrow was, the down pocket where I said we would fish the backs of. Go to the right, right there. That's a lead-in dock on an inside swing. That's a money dock right there.
Mm-hmm. And they're gonna set up on this.
Oh yeah.
Get fat and happy, then slide up to this little inside bend right here. It's protected. Do their thing.
Right. And look at the left. You got two docks in the middle of a little pocket right there.
Yeah.
Those two are money docks.
Yeah. Barry White wrote a song about those two.
So yeah, but you see what I mean. So now all of a sudden you're looking at a map and you could eliminate.
It pops.
You don't have absolutely. All of a sudden things start to stand out.
But let's say you went into that other one and you did catch them on these big floating docks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that would be something then that you would want to go look at, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you had caught them, but even though that's kind of a floating dock on a point, not as deep, but
not quite as deep.
Mm-hmm.
I would fish the three main lake docks leading in on that first.
Yeah.
The solid docks.
Yeah, that's a real easy way to go in and know that you're throwing the right bait around areas where they're going to be or are currently.
Exactly. And where your arrow is now is a major structural element with
Mm-hmm.
a nice, beautiful tabletop on it.
Mm-hmm. You're big on tabletops, Frank.
Yeah, because they're great structural elements because they hold and keep fish.
What are you fishing on them though? It's just big. It's open. It doesn't. I mean, you're not.
I crank them, Carolina rig them, of course. I'll throw suspending jerk baits over the top of them if we're in this cold
just
water.
Just over
period.
open water over the tabletop.
Right,
just trying to intercept. So the fish that are on those tabletops, are
feeding.
They most likely active feeding fish?
Yes, they're most likely feeding and active, and if they're not, they're holding there, but they're there in numbers.
Okay, so let me ask you this then, and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to derail your.
No, you're not derailing me.
So here's my question. So see this yellow stuff? That's a lot of water in there that you can focus on that flat. This point is big and it's a lot. Are you going to also look for possibly a brush pile, a concrete block, a rock, something on that? Because now you found the spot on the spot.
Well, the spot on the spot's going to be the brush pile or the rock pile.
You're looking for something on those big flats that you're casting that the fish will relate to.
100%.
Sometimes they'll be in the middle of nowhere, but if you can identify something on it, more the better.
Right. Everything I do structurally, I'm always looking for what is the highest percentage spot on that structural element. There's always a sweet spot and there's always an angle. And if you make the right angle cast over the sweet spot, I've had times my camera guy and I were doing a crankbait piece. And what happened was we did a Carolina rig piece a couple days prior to the crankbait piece. I pulled up on a spot just to see if fish were on it. And I was reeling my Carolina rig in. I was Carolina rigging a money craw. And I was burning it back to the boat to make another cast. And I had a 4-pounder running it down like it was his job. And so I looked at my cameraman. I said, we're coming back here tomorrow and we're doing a crankbait piece. He goes, how do you know? I said, that fish wanted this thing moving. I said, we're going to kill him on a crankbait. So we did the Carolina rig show. And then I did a quick pro tip on a rigging system that I do on the Carolina rig where I double the braid at the business end of the Carolina rig. And I said, you know what? I said, how much time you got? He goes, dude, I only got like 25 minutes. I got to leave. I go, let's run back to that spot. I pulled 2 crankbait rods out. I had 2 fat-free 7s on. I said, come on, I'll show you what I mean. In 25 minutes, we caught over 40 bass. We had a fish on every single cast. We had probably about a 26-pound limit.
Wow.
He was flipped out. And here he says to me, he goes, you're catching one every time you cast. I'm making 10 or 12 casts to catch one. We're throwing the exact same baits. What the hell are you doing? I said, okay. When you cast over towards that fallen tree on the bank, you feel that big high knob when the crankbait starts crawling over that big pile of rocks? He goes, yeah. I go, stop reeling it the minute you hit the rocks and pause it for a couple seconds. He goes, is that what you're doing? I go, dude, every time I pause the rod, every time I pause the crankbait, they're choking on it. He casts out there, he hits that big pile of rocks, he pauses that fat free, boom, he's got one. I said, see what I'm talking about, dude? And then he went and caught one cast for cast after that, because it's all about the angle, it's all about the retrieve, it's all about figuring it out. Now, I know that's a summertime thing that I just talked about, what we were doing, but it translates in the spring too, because those fish use the same stuff in and out of these creeks and in and out of these pockets all year long. And so it does the same thing. So they're always looking for a high percentage spot on a structural element, no matter what it is. A lone boat dock, brush pile, rock pile, house foundation. You find all this stuff in reservoirs because they're flooded areas. So there's old homes that used to be there. There's all kinds of garbage. Sometimes they cut the trees down in farmlands and they make wind fences out of them. Sometimes you go to reservoirs and these wind fences are underwater, where they piled up all the cut lumber and they never removed it. So these are things that you want to keep in mind, things you want to look at.
There's the creek we just looked at off of the main lake. That's the short pocket right there, I believe.
100%. Yeah, it is.
There's the creek that we started at. We went through all 5 of those slides just now, and it's cool. Hopefully, if you're watching this, you're looking at this creek a lot differently than you were at the beginning of the show.
Yeah, I hope so. And you're looking at that pocket right below it. Now, the reason I chose the pocket below it is because it's right by that creek, and that little pocket has a lot of things going on in it. So I figured if I was going to practice for a day, and it was that time of year that we talked about, that early spring to the spawn, anytime in that range, these are 2 good bets to put you on a main lake pattern and or a creek pattern. And you could cover all this stuff in less than a day. And then the next day you hit the water, you've already fine-tuned it where you could cover mass amounts of water the next few days.
I also like that you don't have to burn any gas at $5 a gallon because there happens to be a
exactly.
parking lot and a boat ramp right in between the 2 of them, Frank.
Exactly. But go ahead.
I'm just curious, dude. You don't have to say the name of the lake, but is this a lake that people watching, maybe 1 or 2 of them, have fished?
I can almost 100,000% guarantee it.
Phenomenal.
I will guarantee it, actually. I won't even almost guarantee it. I will.
Have you fished this lake?
I have fished it.
I
did not pick it because I fished it.
Yeah, you picked it because it was a great example of. I
did not fish that creek, by the way.
Okay, now can you? Okay, for someone that's pulling up their lake, what are some little? I mean, not everything is going to look as perfect as this, but I want someone who can take a lake that they're going to next weekend based on what we just did to today, what you showed today through the 5 slides, taking the baits that you talked about last week during the show. What are maybe some little tweaks, some differences where you can say, hey, it may not look identical to this, but it's going to behave the same way?
Right. So what you're going to look for is good lead-in structural elements such as river channels. You're going to look and see if it has some flats in it, like tabletop type stuff. You're going to look and see if there's a big flatway in the back. You're just going to look for a few key things.
Hmm.
And here, look, let's just say you pick a creek out and there's only two major structural elements in it. Those two major structural elements could be a massive player because it's the only thing in the creek. You follow me?
Yep.
And so that's what you're going to want to understand too. Now, it might not be such a high percentage creek because there's not enough of it to bring a ton of fish into it. But the fish that are there will use that stuff, and there won't be a lot of it, so it'll be easy to find it. But basically, just look for structural elements. Look for good wintering areas throughout the creek. Look for flats, tabletops, a lot of little points. Points are good because they use secondary points. Pre-spawn secondary points is a money pattern. So you want to look for that. Anything else is a bonus, such as boat docks, man-made stuff. That's all bonus.
Hmm.
You know, I don't even look at all that when I look at a map. I just look at the structure, contours,
Boy,
creek channels, and that's how you do it. Basically,
when we started this and looked at it, it didn't really stick out to me, but now that does look money right there.
oh yeah,
The table. I mean, look at that zoomed out. There's not. I'm looking around this whole area, and there's nothing else that drops, and then has the flat, and then drops
right.
again, and then has a flat, and then drops again.
That's a psycho place. I can't believe, as much as I fished that lake, I can't believe I never went in there. To be brutally honest with you.
Yeah, now it's 6. But if you caught it on that, you could literally look at any other creek and you could go, okay, I don't see anything that looks like that.
But
here.
you could go above your arrow and see that. Go to the parking lot, P. Main Lake, right there. That's very similar. It's not
right,
100%.
but this is halfway back in a creek. This is
right.
In the second third, so I could look at every second thirds of the creek if I catch them here and just go, no, nothing else like that. And then you'd be like, 2 creeks up there is. Let's go check that out.
Exactly.
And now at least you have somewhere to go. Even if you've never been on the lake, you're going to an area you've never been to before, and you got confidence.
Right. My first time on Gunnersville, structure fishing Gunnersville in the summer, I got on them on certain ledge types, and I hit 3 of them that were really close, and I literally plastered them on all 3. So I said, okay, this lake is humongous, and there's a ton of offshore stuff. I zoomed out on my map. I picked about 20 places to hit. I ran all 20 spots. 10 of them were loaded. And so it's like, I would have never been able to do that if I just got on a river ledge and just started fishing down the river ledge. Mm-hmm. I saw something that I was specifically looking for where I caught fish on the first couple, and it was very specific. I picked that out on all the other places, and 50% of the places I looked at had fish on them.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it all in a day. So that's why you have to pay attention to where and how your fish are coming from.
I mean, if they are on the beds and you're catching them, and let's say you catch one right there in the back of that turn, then I'm going to look and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to fish that little turn. I'm going to come down and I'm going to fish that one. I'm going to fish that one. I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to say, look at this way down here. It's the exact same type of stuff in there. And now right there, there's one there. But now, obviously you're looking, but same type of stuff.
But now it's all standing out.
Yep. That's good stuff, Uncle Frank.
Yeah, so I mean that's as easy as I can make it. Doing nothing but map work and eliminating. And so if you pay attention to what you're doing, see, I always carry paper maps with me. It's a force of habit from, like Matt says, back in the old days. It's a force of habit. But when I used to fish lakes, when my paper maps, I would write all over them, notes all over them. Mm-hmm. When they would get full of notes or getting ruined from the weather, I started buying 3 or 4 brand new maps. And then I would only mark them at when I was going to a tournament, I would pull a brand new map out and I would start marking down places where I caught fish. And then all of a sudden, when I got to the room at night and I opened that map up, I'm like, oh my God. And the pattern would just jump
Just
out
pop
at
out.
you. And then, and the rest of the time, dude, you are on them the whole time.
Now you're not worried that your paper map's going to blow out of the boat when you have to check your pager?
No, because I have a roll of quarters on me to hopefully find a payphone somewhere. Or a slot machine.
Oh man. On that note, I learned a lot over the last 2 shows. Hopefully all the listeners have learned a lot over the last 2 shows. Like I said, these 2 shows are in conjunction. 61 and 62. You got the goods, you got the bait, you got the rims, the tires, the wheels on how to, once you get there, how to get there. And then this is the guts. This is the engine, the transmission that puts you where you need to be so you can look good once you get there.
Exactly.
Fair assessment? Is that good? Does that work?
It's very good.
There's a better analogy out there. I'm not sure what it is, but we're going with that one. We got to get you to a Buc-ee's, Uncle Frank.
Never been, never even seen one.
You know what that means? That means you might have to hit the trail again next year. So you're forced to tow past, and it'll say, they've got giant signs that says Buc-ee's, 23 miles on the right, and then you see people start lining up, and then you realize you're in it's like the mecca of gas stations.
Exactly, and I got to thank Mark Jeffries for this fine piece of clothing.
That's it. This has been another exciting edition of Day 4 with Frank Scalish. We'll see you guys next week.
Adios.